again, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview since I don't touch on here what my inspiration for this was. I read Catch-22. It's a novel set during World War II, and it covers the topic of a group of fighter bombers that are in what is, well, it's insanity. You probably guessed that by now. It's an insane situation. They're forced to do extra missions, and they're told to do things that they really shouldn't be doing. So people do some terrible things. And it's an overall lengthy, insane situation. So what I decided to do is an analysis of insanity as it pertains to society, because we all sort of know what personal insanity is. You know, people are crazy, people go to the psych ward, people just have their issues. But the question is, what makes a society insane? And I mean, this was brought up in the question of World War II, and what did the Nazis do, and stuff like that. So we've all heard the definition of, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's not really the real definition. This is the real definition. It's this is Webster's dictionary. It's a deranged state of mind usually occurring as a specific disorder. An unsoundness of mind or lack of understanding which prevents one from having the mental capacity required by law to enter a particular relationship, status, or transaction, as such removes one from civil or criminal responsibility. So the criminally insane, or extreme folly or unreasonableness, or be something utterly foolish or unreasonable, which is, it's kind of a quaint definition because this applies to serial killers too, but that's what, that's what we're told in the dictionary. But that doesn't cover what makes a group insane. We all had to read, I believe, the books on the Salem witchcraft trials and kind of do a little bit of analysis on that. So the question is, where does this come into that? So what do you call insane, and what does the rest of society consider that? So there's, what do you consider normal? What is, unacceptable? What is normal? I mean, how many years ago, just a few decades ago, it would have been weird and unacceptable for African Americans or Hispanics to be in a school setting like this. Before that, it would have been impossible for any females to be in a school like this. That would have been insane. Why would you be doing something like that? Nowadays, we don't bat an eye at that. So things change over time. But also, I did some research and found that some things really haven't changed. So, first thing I looked up a lot of experiments and research studies that have been looking into this question of what will people do, and specifically this is looking at what people do under authorities. The experiment with you is Stanley Milgram. It's known as the Milgram experiment. It's 1974. This is the setup right here. It's basically 2 rooms. This one is just it's a visual printed wall, but it allows sound to pass through, and that'll come into play later. So, first person here, this is the teacher. This is the test subject in this experiment. All they're told to do is sit in a room, ask questions of the person on the other side, and it's just language experiments. And they're told that the experiment is to look at what happens when you're given negative reinforcement for learning something. That's not what really the experiment was about. They were just told, give the person an electric shock if they get this question wrong. And the catch here is that the electric shock keeps increasing. It gets up to about 450 volts. If you have a heart condition, it would kill you. If you didn't, it would still be extremely unsafe. But the test here is to see how high they're going to go. So, we're here. Their job is just to occasionally get questions wrong. And it's all faked, so for the sake of the experiment, from safety and everything. But their job is keep reacting. And this is a very dark experiment. So it gets to the point where the person is screaming on the other side, and then they go silent. And it seems crazy right now, but let's progress along. What makes it significant is that there is the experimenter sitting in the room with the person being, the teacher, the person being tested here. All their job is to tell the experimenter to tell the teacher to keep going. The person says, I'm not comfortable, so you say, the experiment must continue. The experiment requires that you continue. And the important part is that they're told that you will not be held accountable for their actions.
Wait, so the guy on the other side of the room, he's just faking being shocked?
He's faking being shocked because it's the experiment is told that it would be a complete, fatal shock. So the question here is, how many people would be willing to deliver this full shot? This is a question, what makes you crazy? Because killing someone's crazy. We've all established that that's what society believes. It's been like that for next to forever. But the experiment, proposed that 2% of people in any population on Earth are psychopaths or sociopaths. They don't really feel empathy. They're crazy people, effectively. This is who's expected to fail the test, and they would deliver the maximum voltage. And bad things would happen that would freak out the researchers, and that was what to be expected. What actually happened though, 65%. That's the number of people that, when this experiment was performed, would go up to the maximum voltage, and sometimes multiple times. People express displeasure, but that's what happened. So, statistically, we ran this experiment with everyone. This has been done multiple times. This was done in 1974 to begin with. It's been repeated hundreds of times. It's a well-established phenomenon here. And it's going to sit around roughly 65%. But the fact is, if I put all of you in this experiment, there's a good percentage of you that would end up doing something like this. So, raises more questions. But, I know, this is a really lovely, pleasant topic. So again, is this unacceptable? Is this normal? It seems like this is kind of irrelevant, though. But so, looked at another experiment. This is one where, it seems a little bit like broad to say, if you're told to do so, you're going to kill someone. It seems like one experiment. So here's another one, Stanford prison experiment. This is actually 1971. This is a little bit beforehand. All these experiments were kind of run in the 70s when things were a little bit looser about regulations. But it's an experiment to look at what would happen. It was originally intended to look at what would happen between prisoners and prison guards. And funded by Office of Naval Research, they wanted to see what happened in wartime conditions if they had to have people held as prisoners or anything like that. And this experiment was run. 24 people were volunteered for this job. They were split into 2 groups, 12 people each, and then 9 were actually involved, and 3 were alternates. And the point is they were split into prisoners and prison guards. And it was an extremely elaborate experiment. Like, the police were involved in this, so they actually did like a whole, they mock arrested the people and charged them with assault, and then shipped them off into this mock prison in the basement of a Stanford University building. And it had everything. It had cells, it had cots, it had solitary confinement, and they also ended up adding a special room for prisoners that would cooperate. The guards were given wooden batons. No, it's fine. You can go.
Oh.
Yeah. Guards were given, reflective glasses, wooden batons. This looks like a bona fide guard or whatever. These are all just university students. These people are, they're mid-20s. Some of these are grad students. Some of these are even younger than that, early 20s. They're undergrads. These were all, and it was the 70s, so these were all white males. That's just sort of how it ran at that time. But the point was, these were all just normal people. They're taken off the street. They were offered barely any money to do this. This wasn't for any particular reason. They were just told to be themselves, and cause a little bit of things. But things worked out badly. They were, there were instances where the prisoners would start rioting. So the guards were told to not beat them up or anything. The sticks were for show, but they used fire extinguishers to suppress the people in there. And then they took away their mattresses, and then they locked people in solitary confinement. And bad things happened. They refused food to the prisoners, and sometimes the prisoners refused food if one person was given special treatment or misbehaved or whatever. And the thing is, this got bad, really bad. The experiment was for 7 to 14 days. It ended after 6, and that was only because the grad student, the guy that was running this, who played the prison warden, objected to this. After roughly 50 other people observed this and said, what are you doing? But no one really voiced any real objections to it, to the point that they stopped. And so, if any of you have seen The Wave or anything like that, it's kind of a similar phenomenon where, people did some sadistic things. So again, these were just average grad students. And this experiment has not been repeated because it raised too many ethical objections and people were doing bad things. So that has not been repeated, but everyone sort of knows how it went. And this is drawn as analogies to what happens in wartime prisons and such like that. So again, is this normal? Is this unacceptable? So now on to some of the more everyday, a little bit more pleasant of the topic. The prisoners don't. I think if any of you taken economics, is kind of sorry to spoil for you, but this is first recorded in 1950. This is, if you notice, these are all in a little bit earlier time frame. I'll get to why these all happened later, but it's. So, are 2 people going to cooperate? Are they going to be doing the sane and normal thing? Say, we're going to work together, we're going to make things better for ourselves. So, basically they're separated and they're told, you have 2 options here, strategy 1, strategy 2. This is play prisoners, right? You can invest on the other person. And the principle of this is that if both prisoners refuse to say anything, it's cooperating. I'm not to say anything, you're not to say anything. The point is that they're separate though, so they can't actually speak to each other. But if they both, think, okay, the other person's not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything, they'll both win out pretty decently. However, if one of the prisoners, does actually cooperate with the police in this experiment, they gain a lot, and the other prisoner loses a lot. So it's a simulated, you get jail time or something like that. And the same would happen if, the other prisoner did the opposite thing and then one didn't say anything. And if both didn't say anything, they're going to, they're both going to receive a minor punishment. If both cooperate, they receive a minor punishment. And everyone sort of, goes on with their time. But it's minimal compared to this. This was the original experiment. They explained everything in just raw numbers for the studies. But it seems like most people will cooperate. That's the same. It's the normal thing to do. That's what, if you and a friend did something stupid and then you were, confronted by your parents or administration, or I guess did something really weird like the police or something like that, you wouldn't say anything to each other. You wouldn't say anything to the police. You wouldn't say anything to your parents. Or if like your siblings did something, you're not going to tell your parents, oh, we both did, this, or say you're going to remain silent. But this is, a repeated experiment a lot of times. And actually, what happens? 80 to 90% of people are going to quote unquote snitch on one another or whatever. And you've probably experienced this. And if you've ever seen someone you with someone else, or even with multiple people, if you've been split up and questioned about things, that's why this happens, because as a group, people were going to behave irrationally, and everyone's going to get the negative side effects of, trying to screw each other over. So, back to this. So what happens? This was almost never done. Most people ended up here, and occasionally here and here were the end results. And this today is why this is a common police phenomenon. If you've seen crime dramas, they lock one person in the room and another person in the room, and they interrogate both of them, and eventually they get a confession out of both of them. And you've always wondered, why would they do that? Why they shouldn't say anything and everyone's fine? It's because of this phenomenon. It's a real thing. So, okay. So, questions. Why were all these experiments performed? This was all brought up in the aftermath of, it first started being brought up in the aftermath of World War II and the Nuremberg trials. Because the thing is, we all know the Holocaust, bad things happened, and the war itself is atrocious, the Pacific Front was atrocious, people died en masse, everywhere. But the question was, can you hold everyone accountable? So we all know the entirety of Germany didn't go to jail. They were sort of given a slap on the wrist, and they had economic problems or whatever, but just the main leaders were brought on trial. The question is, why them? Why not the soldiers that were working in the concentration camps? The argument is they're just following orders, but a lot of people are of the opinion, you can't just follow orders, that's a terrible thing to do, but these experiments were done, and people were following orders. In fact, you can't really blame that society if your society does the same exact thing. And this was again brought up in the aftermath of the Korean War, the Vietnam War, where there were soldiers again doing pretty nasty things, and before it was the social opinion that your side was always in the right, and the other side was always in the wrong, because that's what you were told, and there was really no way of finding it. No one was going to go to the front to find out that both sides were still shooting and killing each other. So this brought up a lot of issues now, and this is why today there's a little bit more of almost an anti-authoritarian thing. If someone tells you to do something, we're statistically more likely to say no. There is a thing with the Milgram experiment that the percentages have dropped very slightly. Not a whole lot, but slightly. And if you modify the experiment where the person's not as forceful in telling you to do something, far fewer people will do anything that would be considered insane or delivering maximum voltage or killing something like that. So, my final conclusions from all this, we're all insane. There's no way of getting around the fact that these studies exist, and everyone's pretty much gone through some analogy of this. You've been told to do something, and you probably didn't want to do it, but you did it anyway. Or your boss told you to get this project done, or take someone else's work or something like that. A lot of us have been in situations like this. Since period's over, I'm just going to finish up. These all have been done countless times. Separate prisoners, the prison experiment, that was an unethical thing. So, final conclusions. I can't pretend to change the world, but stay sane, keep everything.